Welcome, everyone, to episode 9 of How to Do Psychedelics, the podcast where we talk about adventures and misadventures in the lives of psychonauts and how these medicines have helped to shape them into the people that we see before us today on this very show. Today, I have Brad Adams with me. Brad is the founder and CEO of the Los Angeles Medicinal Psychedelic Society, also known as LAMPS, which he has been running since 2015. He is dedicated to providing education and training programs regarding psychedelic medicines and to creating safe spaces where in conversations about all aspects of psychedelics, both the light and the dark aspects, can take place. Well, thank you for making note of the dark aspects because there's certainly a lot of that coming up in these times right now. Brad, great to have you on here. Anything else you want to share about yourself before we get started?
No, I'm sure I'll share things as we go, and I think that's a good start.
Wonderful. So, as we do on this show, I like to kick off with my guest sharing the story of the most meaningful, impactful journey they've had with a psychedelic or a plant medicine that helped to shape them into the person that's here with us today. So, what would that be for you?
It's incredibly hard to narrow it down to one, but I would say one of the earlier ones that kind of changed the course of my life was I was with my best friend at the time, and we did, I think, maybe 3 hits of LSD, and it was amazing. It was just to set the scene. It was in his apartment. In the background, the Moody Blues is playing. Thinking is the best way to travel. He was reading from this book called Mysticism and the New Physics. So it was all interesting stuff. And then I started noticing these energy waves, and like this wave would come, and as soon as I felt this wave, he would start reading faster. It's like a wave was going through both of us, and I thought that's interesting. And then I noticed an energy ball kind of in my tummy or a little bit below, and it felt really good, and it started moving up. It went into When it went into my heart, I just felt this extreme expansion of love, and then it kept going up and up. And I remember the thought went in my head. I wonder what's going to happen when it goes inside my head. And when as soon as it went inside my head, I had what I would call like a 7-second Satori experience. Like just everything became clear,
Mm,
and it was like a mystical experience. Like very not quite a mystical experience. It was more of a very spiritual experience where I everything became clear to me, and I had these certain insights. Like the first one that came to my head was, "Oh, God is real," and and kind of in a Christian sense, God is love, and
mm.
don't fear death. There's nothing to fear about death. It's not the end. And there's a whole nother bunch of other insights came, and it only lasted like 7 seconds, and I started coming down from it. But that changed my life because I wasn't brought up very religious or spiritual per se. I was definitely interested in spirituality and read a lot of Ram Dass and Alan Watts and stuff like that. But I never had a profound experience like that until that time.
And how old
Yeah,
were you
that's just,
then?
I was probably 19, somewhere around there. Yeah, that really opened up my and I just dove into Eastern spirituality after that, and just read a lot more. Try to get that experience again, which I never got with LSD again. That was like a kind of like chasing the dragon. But
Mm.
it changed my life profoundly, and I feel like it opened me up to my own spirituality, which kind of broadened through subsequent experiences with different medicines.
And so, what was your relationship to God or spirituality before that?
It was more of a conceptual, I guess, maybe. Like I never had such a felt experience of God. But in that experience, yeah, like God is love. The idea that whenever you feel love, you're feeling God. Like you feel love for your dog, you feel love for someone else. That's an experience of God. Um, and I really like that idea, that concept, and the feeling. It was just amazing. I never felt such an intense love and insight, past my ego that far before that. Like I
So
said,
when
I've been
this
reading a lot of
bubble,
books, and
mm, so when this bubble came to your head, that's when you have this 7 second Satori experience.
yeah. And then it came when it started coming down, and I the thought came in my head, I'm going to doubt this, and sure enough, it came down, and I thought, was that just a drug experience or was that real? And I'm pretty
Mm.
convinced it's real. But and then kind of a funny twist to that story is that here's my experience of heaven, right? And then a few moments later, I realized, oh shit, I gotta drive and drop off this car. So uh, I won't go into the details of that, but it was I don't recommend driving when you're
Oh yeah, as they say, after the ecstasy, the laundry. But we always
yeah.
learn in some fashion to give ourselves more time after our experiences to integrate. In some ways, I'm still learning to give myself a few days off just to come back. No, it's funny. It reminds me of that old game, like 7 minutes in heaven, but you got 7 seconds in Satori. When it hit that Satori space, did it turn into like an ego death? Like, did you dissolve into unity consciousness, or is it more like embodied and something you engaged with and interfaced with?
Yeah, something more along those lines. Like it wasn't like a 5-MeO experience where the ego completely dies. It
Hmm.
was more of an I and thou, I guess, relationship where there was a witnessing part of me that was seeing this and processing it, not as it, but per se, but just feeling the effects of it. The effects of the profound experience. So yeah,
Hmm.
very different from like a profound 5-MeO experience.
And was there anything challenging about that journey in general, even if not related to this specific part of it?
The only challenging part was driving afterwards. The experience itself was amazing. Um, and I
Hmm.
didn't know anything about like my sense is that it's probably maybe a Kundalini experience or something because that's with the ball of energy moving up. I read later that yeah, oh yeah, it's a serpent coming up. Amazingly profound experience. And again, I tried to replicate that and
I'm curious, is that what you were going for? Was that your intention for this journey? Was it intentional, or were you simply wanting to trip with your buddies and see what happens?
that was kind of the intention to trip, but the fact that we were surrounding ourselves, reading from mysticism and the new physics and all these other things is
Mm,
kind of wanting a deeper understanding of the universe and maybe have a profound experience that way. I had no idea that it was going to be that powerful and that life changing.
yeah. And so, one thing I
In
like to
terms of,
also understand. Oh, go ahead. Please continue.
I think we have a
I'm
delay
always
here, so
curious about.
sorry about that.
Yeah, it might be a little delay. I'm always curious about the conditions of one's life before they come into an experience like this, because I always find in some ways one's path is according itself to such an experience. Like, where were you in your life at that time? Like, what were you challenged by, struggling with? What were your prayers and dreams for yourself that organized into this experience?
It's a good question. I think at that time, I had started at USC pre-med. I wanted to be a plastic surgeon. And
Mm-hmm.
it took three semesters to dissuade me of that, and I decided to go into psychology. So I was in the kind of in that mode of switching, and partly because of some of these psychedelic experiences, I thought, the human body is fascinating, but the human mind and psyche, to me at that point, was even more exciting. And it's like I think Jung said, the psyche is the most mysterious and powerful, thing in the universe. And so I was really in the point of my life where I was exploring that more, self-discovery, like who am I, and what are the parts of me, what are my limitations, light and the dark, um, and yeah. So I'd made that switch and I left USC and started as a psychology major and stuck with that. And eventually got my PhD. So that was yeah, I guess that's kind of a pivotal moment, and also the spiritual aspects of psychology, because I really got later in life I got interested in transpersonal psychology, which I thought, my God, this is it. This is the wave of the future, and this is what really excites me, is because we're not just these thinking brains. There's so much more to our psyche than our thoughts and our
Hmm.
logical side. There's all sorts of other things that make up our being human. A lot of things we don't.
Hmm.
I think we're still discovering, and it's still like just it's just fascinating to. I mean, humans are fascinating in both positive
Absolutely.
and negative ways. I think, yeah.
Well, this tracks really well because, as practitioners ourselves and has lots of experience in psychonautic spaces, and many people who are interested about this work understand the idea of the setting, and the substance, right? What your mindset is, how you're preparing for it, what the space is like, who you're with, what you're doing during that journey, and then what results from that. Because when you understand what your intention was and how you were preparing, you can better make meaning of what was happening. And so I find no surprises in what you experienced, considering the transition you had just begun, moving from wanting to be a plastic surgeon into the realm of consciousness and psychology as best we understand it in the Western world. And then also being with people that you trusted. I imagine it was a safe space with you and your friends, a collective intention to hold that space, to dive into metaphysics and spirituality by sharing from a book. I haven't heard that before, but hey, why not? If someone can read, that's a great way to guide a journey. And then having what sounds to me like your primary spiritual or primary mystical experience, which we understand is something that is available to us in the right conditions with these medicines. And I love how it's LSD, because so many people that I speak with, especially in these, more intentional spiritual communities, they kind of push aside the synthetics. But, you know, we understand, and many do who are experts and professionals in this field, Stan Groff, and the godfather of psychedelic therapy. It was all LSD. And one thing that really sticks with me from that work is that it brings up a lot of like our internal material. It shows us what's going on in our own like subpsychic realms, and really brings to light what's happening for us in our lives, which was this transition for you. And that sounds like a powerful and accurate blessing in that way specifically. It's also interesting for me because I've never gone on like an intentional LSD journey, and I've been like kind of moving towards that. I have a friend here who wants to do that for me, and I feel like I'm just getting more feedback to just try that on. I've had many great experiences with it recreationally, uh, but that was in my early days. So this has given me a little like more of a nudge in that direction.
Good, good. Have you ever read Chris Bache's book, LSD and the Mind of the Universe?
That one I haven't heard of. I mean, I've read Huxley, Doors of Perception, but as far as LSD literature, no, not beyond that.
I highly recommend it. It's like in the top two of my favorite books about uh, psychedelic medicines. So, in a nutshell, what he did, I think over the course of 20 years, he did 76, I believe, high dose LSD excursions. By high dose, I mean like 500 to 600 micrograms.
Goodness.
Took copious notes as a good psychonaut. And it's one of the most fascinating books I've ever read. And we've had him on Lamb's events a couple times. And in fact, I'm going to invite him back for another uh, panel with maybe Paul Levy and Robert Falconer.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be fascinating. Yeah, read LSD in the Mind of the Universe. I guarantee it'll fascinate you because you talk
Mind
about
of the universe.
yeah LSD and Mind of the Universe, and I think there's a colon like diamonds. God, I'm blanking on the second part, but you'll get it with that. It's I have it on audio, and I think I've listened to it 3 times, and there's you always get something. It's just such a rich excursion into. I mean, he went through periods of pure sheer hell, like feeling just the negative karma of the whole species, and just it wasn't all blissful like diamond luminosity. It's like the yin and the yang.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go through hell sometimes to get to heaven, and
Well, when
of
you
course, like
mention that, it reminds me of what Groff says about the perinatal experience. Like, so many people are brought back to their birth experience, and there's something about the archetypal imprints that they receive as they're coming through the birth canal. And I always find people's accounts with LSD when they talk about these massive cultural pain bodies and cultural myths that come through in perfect detail, like seeing the gods like Shiva and Ganesha and things that couldn't otherwise have been explained in any other way just come so clearly with no relationship to them whatsoever. It's like there's something to that. And yeah, it can bring us deep into ancestral pain and joy.
yeah, I've experienced that on other substances too. Just this collective grief and the collective just pain. And
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like it was
yeah,
a
that was
very
fun.
fortuitous journey. But would you have, looking back, done anything differently other than not driving afterwards?
uh, no, I don't think I would tinker with it because I mean, what happened needed to happen happened.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you're right in terms of just the basic ingredients of setting. You want to be safe with someone you love and trust. Um, and we created kind of that environment, even in terms of the music. Like I said, we had the Moody Blues playing, which I used to love back then. I still love them, but yeah, it's like all those ingredients together just uh, made for an amazingly profound experience. So
Mm-hmm.
I would, if I went back in time, I wouldn't change anything
Yeah. Sounds like
except
one
maybe
that's
driving.
not worth changing for sure.
Yeah.
And so,
So
what
I'm just curious.
inspired you? Go ahead.
I was going to ask about your most profound experience, or have you mentioned it on this podcast a lot already? Or I'm just kind of curious to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone into great depth on my most profound pivotal moment in my life with psychedelics, and I'm happy to mention it here. Is when I went to the Amazon for 2 weeks to sit with the Hunikuan in their village, in Novo Futuro village, like a 4-day boat ride from the closest third world city in Brazil. And the city is putting it nicely. And in those 2 weeks, you're sitting with ayahuasca like 14 times. And some of them are just more casual nights where they're just sliding water down ayahuasca, down the altar and just jamming Sol Alegria style. And 200 people per ceremony. Massive, massive, massive works. 100 indigenous on one side and 100 of all the aspirants from around the world on the other. Kind of felt like an old high school dance where the boys and girls are separated, wasn't circular. But everything there was perfect because you're held in the safety and the heart of the Amazon, the home of this medicine and these wisdom keepers. But they entirely lacked any preparation ethic or integration ethic, and things really fell apart afterwards. Like, thank God I had Len, my mentor in my corner, kind of guided me along the way. But I went deep, deep, deep down into depression, anxiety, near suicidality. It took me a long time to get it back together. In my integration process and continuing to learn about what that meant, it helped me understand how powerful these medicines are with the right conditions, and also how dangerous they can be if the support that Westerners uniquely need is not present. And thankfully, I've come to right relationship with that experience within the past year or so. I was very angry about it for a long time. And the people that I saw who were walking in a similar way, I wasn't able to help them because I was like shaking my finger at them and saying, "You're doing this wrong. Like this is unsafe." Like, and I kind of just forgot and overlooked the fact that I had this unique experience, this embodied experience of what is necessary in many ways for Westerners to walk this path safely, and also all the excellent training I received from my teacher and his peers, and understanding that's kind of a rarefied thing. We're just starting the conversations on harm reduction, benefit optimization, as Merrill likes to say, and just safety overall. Like the ethical conversation on safety is so nascent, and so this is why I love the work that you're doing with lamps, because you're spreading awareness and offering education and information to help inform people out there to make a discerned decision. And so it's not like we can go around and be the police and say like, okay, this is safe, this isn't, blah blah blah. It's like, no, we need people to understand how to choose wisely, and I think that's the most important work to do right now.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I agree. Like, when I first got into this and started lamps in 2015, it was kind of like a lot of people. It's just like, oh my God, this beautiful renaissance. These things are being studied again, these medicines. It was all looking at the light aspects of it. And then over the course of a number of years, it's like, yin and yang. It's like, maybe we should start looking at the shadow aspects too, because you see a lot of, when humans get involved with anything, there's going to be some bad players in the field and some dangers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's even more important now more than ever, because, as we were talking about earlier before we got on here, there's some a lot of people being harmed, some
Mm-hmm.
unintentionally by maybe just people aren't trained well enough, and some intentionally. Some you know so much bad stories about people being raped or robbed or harmed psychologically one way or another. It's intentionally or not. It's just and nobody wants to shut down of this, like what happened in 1970 in the Nixon administration. So if we don't
Yeah.
police ourselves, we don't want the government coming in to tell us what to do in this area. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to police ourselves and help each other out to
Mm-hmm.
make sure we do limit the harms going out, however we can. And that's the $20,000 question. And we've had so many conversations about, what can we do to just usher in this beautiful renaissance? Because it feels like it's in a lot of ways it's a seedling that's still, it's coming out and liable to be trampled upon. So we need to guard it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the way I look at it is like, how can we actually bring it into a renaissance? 'Cause it doesn't quite feel that way to me right now. It's kind of like the Wild West, more of like a revolution. There's revolutionary energy. It's really like big and kind of messy and chaotic. It's like we're in the storming phase before we're norming, and like norming is
Yeah, I
like
like that.
where we're in harmony and synergy. And so, what was it that inspired you to start Lamps? I'm assuming or imagining has something to do with what we're discussing here.
Yeah. I think it was around 2012. I was working at UCLA, and so when as an employee there, you get emails about different research and things going on around UCLA, and a lot of times it'd be something that's not my area or not interesting or like something chemical, something I didn't understand and didn't seem interesting. And then one day I saw a story about um, at Harvard UCLA, they were doing a study using psilocybin for people with stage 4 cancer who had severe death anxiety, like almost crippling death anxiety. And
Hmm.
I just about fell off my chair. I go, oh my God, I had no idea this was going on. Um, and so I read the results of it. And it was just, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that was a pilot study they did at UCLA. I think they had like 12 people. And then once they got positive results from that, by positive results, I mean like almost everyone had, severe, steep decline in their depression and anxiety. A lot of people
Mm,
got more in terms, they accepted that they're going to die, and they're more okay with that, because a lot of times they would have a mystical experience, and it would be very comforting to them. Then they expanded that to Johns Hopkins, who did a larger study, and then finally NYU. So there's like those three studies, and they all had very similar findings. I mean, just almost all positive. So that
hmm.
really seemed a lot more interesting than the research I was working on at the time, which, it was valuable, but nothing on the same, you know, ballpark as that. So, so after that, that was kind of like I knew at that point that I wanted to do something in this area. So I ended up doing a small pilot study with Dennis McKenna and Charlie Grobe in with ayahuasca, and got some really fascinating results from that. I'd love to follow up on that. Um, if anyone's interested in watching that, it is on YouTube. Just put my name in there and psychedelics. It should come up. Talk at Maps 2017 gave the results. And then after that, I was asked to give a talk at the Aware Project, which was at that time was the kind of the only game in town in LA for psychedelic meetings and talks and education. And I was asked to give a talk
Hmm.
about mushrooms are medicine, which I didn't know a lot about, but I boned up on it, and I just was amazed about all the amazing research and research findings out there with psilocybin. So I gave that talk, and the Aware Project was they had a lot of different types of speakers. They had scientists, but they also had practitioners, and they had uh, just a wide variety of talks. And at that time, I was really interested in the research aspect, so I thought, why don't I start my own group? And so I brought a sign-up sheet there, and I started having monthly meetings at UCLA, which at the beginning I just wanted to get people interested in research, and that quickly dis- not dissolved, but transformed into getting guest speakers. And so we got Dennis McKenna, we got just tons of great people, each month, a different person. But I kept my day job, in cancer research. This was kind of like a side gig. And then eventually we did the 2018 conference at UCLA, which is, I could have died after that and been a happy man, just like, oh my God, such
Yeah.
a wonderful experience. It was the first conference in LA of that type since the 60s. And we had,
Hmm.
Gabor
Wow.
Mate, Dennis McKenna, James Fadiman, just a whole host of amazing speakers. So,
Yeah, entirely. That makes perfect sense. I love how the research around mushrooms from all these different organizations and research groups is just so um, similar. It's hard to deny that actually working for these chronic issues. And yeah, it makes sense that that would grab your attention, and you found a niche and you filled it, focusing more on like what's happening here in the research and bringing all these like such influential heavy hitters into space. What a gift to the Los Angeles community. Um, so where are you now with lamps? What's present at this point?
yeah, I'll get to that, but I just wanted to say one more thing about mushrooms since that came up. Just today,
Hmm.
posted something in Lamps that I saw research findings with people who amputees who had like phantom limb pain, and amazing results. They gave them like a heroic dose, like I guess 5 grams equivalent. I think like 70% reduction in the pain, and other studies are showing just how it's useful for pain. It's almost like it resets the brain in some way. So it's just, and we're just at the cusp of seeing what these amazing medicines can do. So it's an exciting time to be in the psychedelic field, because I think the world needs
Yeah.
a lot of healing, a lot of things outside of pharmaceutical aid. go back to what
Yeah.
uh, Labs is up to. Um, we planned a conference back in October of last year that we had to pull the plug on. And so we're kind of retooling and kind of refocusing on doing different things. Like we noticed that people are really thirsty for training. And we had a couple of different training events that, and I think that's really necessary. Like, we talked earlier about people not being adequately trained and, and that causing harm, either usually unintentionally. But so I think it's really important for people to get good training, especially if they want to be a sitter for someone. At least know the basics
Hmm.
and setting dose, safe environment, but also be prepared to what happens if you're sitting for someone and their trauma comes up or they have a recovered memory that is troubling for them. And a lot of these training programs, not to bash them, but I, sometimes I see people coming out, they're not adequately trained. Um, I have a PhD in psychology, but I don't, I wouldn't say I'm prepared for everything. I think it requires a lot of humility and a lot of uh, self-reflection and just knowing yourself. We just had
Hmm.
um, the last training we did was on transference and countertransference uh, in psychedelic therapy through an IFS lens. And
Hmm.
because a lot of people, some training programs don't teach about transference and countertransference, and it's important. I think it's important to know, you
Massive.
know, what. Yeah, it's that's my PhD training. There's a big emphasis on that, and I'm so glad there was because even in psychology, some training programs just kind of gloss over that. Say, oh, just don't don't do countertransference, as if you have a choice. Um,
You don't have a
so it's
choice. It's
important
gonna
to know.
happen.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's important to realize when it does happen, and you know, hopefully you'll have some sort of supervision or someone you can talk to about it and get it like an outside reflection, like, oh, it sounds like you might be doing this, that, or the other. So stuff like that. So training programs. We're still working on uh, documentaries. My colleague Paul Lacey and I finished one on psychedelics and addiction recovery, and now we also are working on one psychedelics, no, psychedelic churches. So we got to get back to that one,
Mm.
and
Hmm.
that one's real interesting, and it's going to be interesting to see because we need to do some follow-up interviews with people we interviewed early on
Yeah.
because a lot of things have changed with um, in that respect, good things and
I
bad
want to
things.
riff a bit more on this training thing because trainings and certifications in the psychedelic space have become a really hot offering out there. And you said something when you were speaking earlier about it. Yeah, training to be sitters. Like, yeah, that's something that's totally accessible. Learning how to be with someone and hold space for their experience. And it also necessitates knowing oneself really well because many of us who are coming into this are still grappling with so much trauma that we're aware of, so much more that we're not. And like, you need to be acutely aware of what you're bringing into the space so you know how to navigate it if it comes up, more like when it will. And then there's a question of training to be an actual facilitator. And I feel like that's where things get really messy. There are so few trainings out there that I see that actually incorporate the most necessary element, which is the experiential part. A lot of it's theory, a lot of it's very didactic. And I feel like this is where the churches that you mentioned come in. They're allowed to bring the ethic of medicinal, psychedelic, or plant medicine facilitation under the auspices of sacramental use. And due to that, they have the right to train their ministers also by experience, by sitting with each other. And I feel like that's the best way to prepare someone to be something more than a sitter. Because there's levels to this. There's simply sitting for someone who's having their experience. There's in a way facilitating it, so creating the conditions, setting up the environment, playing the music or setting up a good playlist, preparing them with coaching, integrating afterwards. And then there's the higher level, being a guide, which includes a lot of experience and also practice in some shamanic arts or tools, which are necessary to literally engage with the energy and understand what's happening for you and guide their energy in a way that is most beneficial for them, which of course requires a deep understanding of where this person is in their life and where they want to go. And so, yeah, there's a lot happening out there with this. And to me, I still feel like the gold standard is the way it's always been, which is apprenticeship. Find someone who's a master, who understands both the unbroken ancient lineage of whatever medicine you want to engage with and hold and serve. And also, if you're going to be working with people who are addled by Western disease and challenges that are very unique to our condition, having the proper skill set of modern psychosomatic offerings, whether it's IFS or somatic experiencing or compassionate inquiry, like these things that I feel they take the idea of what Jung has offered, which is like a bridge from the purely Western psychological approach and bridging it with archetype and mythology. This is what depth psychology, I feel like, has been so helpful and why so many of these new modalities have bridged from it. Like IFS is kind of an extension of depth psychology. Because I have this belief, this is my personal belief, that largely most of the psychotherapeutic practices out there, they're addressing the symptoms like depression and anxiety and things like that. And then when someone comes to a psychological baseline, like they're psychologically, psychically well, what is necessary after that, or what is, I guess, most helpful for our development as human beings, is being ushered or guided into a relationship with nature or God, however this person sees it. And this requires a relationship with the mythological, the symbolic, the more spiritual. And I feel like this is where Jung really nailed it. Like he's created a bridge for that. And that's what I feel is most important to bring in if someone really wants to be someone's guide, be their person that's going to walk them through their healing of their psychological distress and further into a powerful relationship with nature or God. They also got to understand that too. And that also necessitates that this person who's doing the guidance has also done that work. That's a lot. That's a lot to ask for.
I completely agree, and I love the way you laid it out in terms of levels because I mean the trainings that we've done, we're not giving out diplomas saying, "Oh, you're now a facilitator. Go and do heal everyone." It's like it takes a long time to get to a point where you feel at the very least you're not doing harm. The Hippocratic Oath, of all do no harm, and a lot of people just want to learn the basics of sitting. They might not want to be a psychopomp, like a guide. And so at the very least, they should learn those skills, setting, dosage, music, sense, with informed consent about touch and safety and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all people want. They want to sit for their friend or sit for their, family member or something. So
Mm-hmm.
it's great to provide that, and hopefully those people won't go out and think that they're able to sit with someone who had a severe trauma that they want to deal with, because they don't have the training for that. And then you have
Yeah.
the I'm always appalled when I even hear the question about do you think people who are sitters or psychedelic sitters or guides should have had some psychedelic experience themselves? To me,
Of course.
it's like fuck yeah. I think theoretically someone could be a kick-ass psychologist and you know help someone, but yeah, of course
Yes.
you need to go to Greece before you can tell someone what Greece is like. Be a guide to
Truly.
Greece. Sure you can Google map it. You can watch YouTubes, but I think the best thing is to go to Greece, right, and kind of stay there for a while and learn the terrain. So So yeah,
Yeah.
there's such a,
And
and like you mentioned before, a lot of this stuff is like it's heady, it's didactic, which is good. You need the theoretical framework sometimes to
absolutely.
know how to process things, but you also need the mat time. You need to deal with your own shit. You need to, dig in the dirt and struggle with the growth process of dealing with your shadow. You need to know your shadow. You need to know you have a shadow, so you know when you're projecting it onto someone. So yeah, when I see some training programs that don't do that, it's just like uh, they charge 10, 20,000 bucks. It's like, yeah, I know they're doing some good. I don't want to bash them too much, but it's like, you know, practice, mat time. You gotta, you know, I could watch,
Hmm.
tennis tennis YouTubes all day, and like unless I get on the court, I'm not gonna really know how to do a kick-ass serve or
I mean, that's a great point. It's what's coming up for me is like we through informing and educating and spreading awareness, I feel like there's space for people to understand that there's so many different levels that they can enter in being a helper in this work and not have to go straight for the gold to be a guide, right? Because so many people have these profound experiences of transformation, healing, and yes, of course, they want to share that with others. Though there's so much merit to people who are saying, you know what, I just want to be a microdose coach, or I want to be like a psycholytic dose sitter. Let's help people dip their toes into these mythic waters because there is so much just like waiting around the next corner that you don't know what's going to come up as far as like their own personal trauma or ancestral trauma. Like we are just this cauldron of pain waiting to erupt. And that I believe is something that people need to understand much more powerfully. It's like there's a lot of help you could do by someone who's had, you know, even if they've had a handful of powerful experiences, if you learn how to sit for someone and you just learn how to hold space for them to simply test out psychedelics, just try them, like be with them for a microdose or like I said, a small psycholytic dose and just see how that works out. Hang out with your friends and family, people that know you and trust you and just get some get some experience under your belt, before you run out and say like, okay, I'm a guy. Let's do a retreat. Let's go to Bali or Hawaii or Costa Rica and go to the jungle and just go all in and then, see what happens. It's like, I get it. Like that's where we want to be. I get that. We want to be in our villages, in our circles, but that's exactly it. We need to create our villages again first so we have these safe dynamics where we know who to go to for the support that we need. The shaman, the medicine man, woman knows what's going on. You're in that safe number of people, like 150-ish, where like you get what's happening in this like homeostatic organic environment, but we're just getting there. We just need to enjoy dipping our toes into that sacred spring and noticing a little bit of gold and being with that. We got to slow down. That reminds me of the talk at the last MAPS conference. What was can't remember now. Someone was really putting that lesson out there that we need to slow down. I think it was Jesse something or other speaking to Michael Pollan. Do you remember that? Anyway, let that one go. But that's what he was espousing. Is that we need to slow down. Just take our time. Take our time. Temper the excitement. Be curious and pay attention to what's happening.
yeah, I kind of agree, and because a lot of people now are just feeling like it's psychedelics have been overhyped and they're overhyping it, and to a large extent, I think that's true. Like I remember last time in Denver, it seemed like everyone and their dog was opening up a ketamine clinic. Which on one hand is great because yeah, a lot of people could benefit from it. A lot of it does show some good short-term effects for depression and can get someone out of a
Mm-hmm.
suicidal ideation phase. But I've I've seen some people that I think are just in it for the money, or and I've seen
Mm-hmm.
some clinics. I won't name names, but high-ranking, names, just total medicalizing it. Like I had a friend who tried everything to get um, rid of his deep depression, and I had to pick him up from the waiting room. It was just like just sitting there alone. There's like no one. I don't think there's really a psychologist even on. It's just like almost like getting chemotherapy. You get in, get the
Hmm.
medicine, and then the medicine will alleviate your depression. It's like just ignoring the whole, like talking to the person, like, oh, what happened during your experience? You know, they could have had an experience of going to hell or going to heaven or talking to dead relatives, and it's like it's almost like that's a adverse event. It's like, oh, side effects may include, feeling like you're in hell or seeing angels. And it's such a
Hmm.
waste of the journey. I have nothing. Well, let's see if I can put this right way. Western medicine's great for what it is, you know, and uh,
Hmm.
and it shouldn't just be like, we're not just machines that, oh, you have a loose bolt here, so let's just tighten that up, or it's like you're a robot. We're much more complex than that. We're, body, mind, and spirit, and I think
Hmm.
all three of
Hmm.
those need to be addressed. And, we're emotional beings. So so some of these clinics that come up and just treat it all like just a medicine, like you're getting chemo, I think is a big mistake. And it's, a lot of times I feel, there's a lot of money to be made because for pennies worth of ketamine, you can charge up the wazoo.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. It's. I mean, that's just it too. They're being allowed to use this medicine as a psychedelic based upon their understanding of its import as an allopathic medicine for pain reduction. And so the people who are offering it in these clinics, like you said before, they don't barely have any experience using it in these psychedelic, doses that can bring you to transpersonal spaces. And with that, the people on their staff are engaging with the clients largely from an allopathic Western model. I had the privilege of supporting quite a few great clinics and getting and cutting my teeth as a psychedelic coach for many clinics. And I would hear some wild reports like when someone comes in to check on them, it's not like this soft, gentle sort of like, hey, how are you doing? Do you need anything? It's like they're coming in hot as if this person is like a medical emergency and like asking them all these direct and like, questions about what's going on, like yes, no answers, and it rattles them, it doesn't work at all. And then you have other providers who are doing like telemedicine with ketamine. Now you got these nasal ketamine devices all over the streets and clubs now, and now it's one of these designer drugs that's hit the streets, and like that's a problem. And so we lack the proper training and awareness and preparation of how to offer this medicine as a psychedelic, not just as, something that relieves pain. We're way too ahead of ourselves. This is exactly why I was relieved when MDMA wasn't greenlit to be consumer grade medicine, because it would have went straight to these same clinics using it and offering it in the same way with complete ignorance that's dangerous.
yeah, I agree. That's why you got to look at, again, the yin and the yang. Like all these great medicines have a potential for abuse and harms. And it's important to look at that and
Mm-hmm.
address it and not put something out as a panacea. Feeling depressed, all you need to do is, I got a great example of that. Like, I forget how many years ago, maybe, or 2017, around there. But Jordi Riba was a researcher in Spain. He was one of the leading researchers for ayahuasca. They came up with a way of freeze drying. Doing research with ayahuasca is incredibly hard, right? Because you have a mixture of at least two ingredients, chacruna and the vine, maybe some other things. So just getting a standardized treatment, you don't know what, you go to a shaman too. They usually don't measure how much they're pouring. So we figured out a way to freeze dry it and encapsulate it. And that way you could test one capsule and know, okay, this person's getting this much of this substance, which, I it's important in terms of Western medicine to, I think, to know that and to get it, legitimized in scientific literature. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and to continue on the positive side of that, and they got some interesting results, which I won't go into, but so on the positive note, I think say for instance, you find that it does alleviate anxiety and depression, like in smaller doses or whatever. Some people will not go to Peru and see a shaman or something. Some people will only trust their white coat doctor. So if something like that's available, that that's a
Yeah,
good thing for them, right? Uh,
totally.
but then on the negative side, you're totally taking it outside of its cultural, container and despiritualizing it in a big way and just making it more like a pharmaceutical.
Hmm.
And the scientist part of me thinks it could be really interesting to see if you compare, like someone goes to the Amazon, someone sees the white coat doctor, and they do get similar amounts or something, and do the Icaros really make a difference? Does it, all that sort of stuff, or is it just through medicine? And yeah, my strong hypothesis is it's within the container is better because it's but that it's again it's not for everyone, and I don't know, it's a double-edged sword. Not sure where I was going
Yeah.
with that, but
No, I mean, you're right. There is definitely merit to people feeling safe and going into an environment that they're familiar with to begin exploring these medicines. And I feel with the right training and education and awareness, such clinics offering ketamine and one day MDMA could be the perfect entry point for many people to begin contending with their depression, anxiety, and other chronic mental illness. Yeah, totally agree with that. I do want to ask you for potentially another story. So we heard the story about your coming to God and knowing God as love with LSD. But I'm also curious to know if you've had any psychedelic or plant medicine experiences that helped you heal any of your own pain or trauma in the ways that we have been discussing.
yeah, and for me that would definitely be ayahuasca. Um,
Mm,
I did it in the States the first couple of times, and yeah, I mean, it's hard to describe in terms of any specific thing that was healed. Uh, but for instance, the first time I tried it, it was kind of early in the day before there were there were so many of them, right? And so I got wind of one coming up, and I thought, oh, God, I'd really like to try that. And so, but I had no idea how hard it would be to find a ceremony again because it was a traveling group from Colombia. So I went in thinking, I want to get my money's worth. And I don't know when I'll be able to try this again. So I ended up drinking 4 cups, which I'll never do again, by the way. It was just what I needed at the time, but man, it was overwhelming. But I thought I was going to die, purging like crazy, just a lot of scary imagery in addition to positive stuff. I felt so good after that. I just felt like so much was lifted, just cleaned out of my psyche that needed to be cleaned out, and my body too. I think a lot of that purging was, just built up toxicity in my body from,
hmm
and and I did make lifestyle changes after that. I think I just started respecting my body a little bit more and thinking, which is I think pretty common for people who have a positive and harrowing ayahuasca experience.
hmm
In fact, that research I was telling you about in the Psychedelic in Peru, we did captured longitudinal data. So we got measures of depression, anxiety, and nine measures of psychiatric distress. And we got it like before the ayahuasca, then had 3 ayahuasca ceremonies, then after that. So we got a pre and post. And then we got a 3-month follow up and a 6-month follow up after that. So uh, we could see that, as you'd imagine, pre and post is like this, like depression, you get a significant drop, which is good. Hooray.
Yeah.
But what was more surprising was, after 3 months after that, it was it made a huge drop, even bigger than the pre and post. And so, and then the 6-month follow up, it dropped a little bit more. But, I was just concerned that it would be something like ketamine, where you have this flash in the pan where like you get temporary relief, and then it just goes back. And we didn't find that. So, which just is a testament to the medicine, and there's something else going on rather than like you look at through a medical lens. The half life of ayahuasca is probably I don't know, days or something. So it's not going to be just the biochemistry itself is not going to keep those things moving forward. I don't think there has to be something, a real
Hmm.
energetic shift or a change in perspective, something awakening within you, or lifestyle changes that sustain these gains. That's the trail of the question. What was the original question? Sorry.
Well, it was asking about a journey you had that helped you heal something, some kind of pain or trauma,
Yeah,
and it sounds like you mentioned you came out with a little less depression or maybe some anxiety, and also building up a more robust personal care practice as well.
yeah, yeah. That was a big pivotal for me. I just was very powerful in a different way than the LSD was, because I didn't have anything like a spiritual awakening or anything like that. It wasn't that kind of thing. It was more in terms of healing trauma or healing or setting me on a better course. And that's been kind of that's
Hmm.
what I love about ayahuasca. Is like grandmother can be very loving in a firm way sometimes. Like she'll spank you if you need to be spanked, and say and show you
Hmm.
like, okay, here's the crossroads. This is you keep going this way, that's what's going to happen. If you go this way, that's going to happen. And for me, that was very instructive and very powerful. And I didn't get that from the LSD. The LSD was more like a just waking up to my spirituality. This is more like a didactic rehaul of my life, which was
Hmm.
just what I needed at that time. I'm very um, fortunate for it. And
Yeah, I like
yeah,
these contrasts because it really does largely illuminate like the nature of these two medicines. Like we said about LSD, it's largely about understanding ourself and our inner psychology and the mythology and psychic substructures of like who we are. And of course, like any psychedelic or plant medicine in the right conditions can bring you to that connection to God consciousness, which is what you've got there as well. And then other medicines like mushrooms or ayahuasca and ibogaine, and they're they're largely, I could say, I personally think they're a little more complex because of their spirit plant nature. And many people have reported that, yeah, this is where we come into like the deep spiritual like healing. And there's still a lot to understand about how they're doing that, but the results are clear. And we're getting more tuned to which medicines, which psychedelics or plants are going to help with certain kinds of conditions or certain goals that we have for development personally or spiritually. And so I'd like to wrap up with you sharing with us what offerings do you have right now with lamps? Any events or like any offerings, talks, or books or anything, and where people can find you if they want to learn more about you and the lamps organization.
sure. Uh, well, people can reach me, I guess, badams.lamps@gmail.com is a good way if you want to email. We do have we're working on a website that's not quite up and ready, but we still have our old website up for the conference we were going to do in October, which we're going to make online. But people can go to lamps.org, which is LAMPSS, two S's.org, and there's a place where you can sign up for email, get our email list, and that's a good way to stay in touch with us and what's going on. And also, face, Facebook is the next best way, and it's LAMPS, Los Angeles Medicinal Psychedelic Society. Uh, very active there. I'm always posting new findings, scientific findings, and just not just scientific, but just pretty active in there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good way to stay in touch with that. We do have April 12th. We have James Fadiman and Jordan Gruber just came out with their book on microdosing. Was maybe the definitive book on uh, all the evidence and just looks like a pretty fascinating book. So, and that's April 12th. What else we got going on? Oh, Joshua Tree Music Festival. I'll be there giving maybe one or two talks, and that's May 15th through the 18th in Joshua Tree. And I believe you can just look up Joshua Tree Music Festival online and find out the dates for that. I'll be at
Great
the
one.
MAPS conference, Psychedelic Science 2025. That's June 16th to 20th. I'm going to be on a panel, and let me give you the exact title of it. Healing Our Communities, Conflict Resolution, Our Collective Responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
You can see me give that talk if that sounds interesting to you. We got a lot of the other things in the cooker. I want to actually do a really brief event for psychedelic sitters, like we were talking about. Just give like maybe a 2-hour event. We'll just go over the basics. Not giving any diplomas out, like now you can just sit with anyone. But it's like if you want to sit for your friend or whatever, here's the basics what to know, and that will be announced pretty soon. You and I talked about the possibility of doing some sort of a men's group online, which I would love. I think we both have keen interests in Carl Jung's work and the work with archetypes. And I've been wanting to do one for years using King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, which was big back in the 90s, and covers those 4 archetypes, which I think are pretty cool to work with. And then also
Absolutely.
mentioned Gods in Every Man. For those who don't know Jean Shinoda Bolen's work, she's a Jungian analyst, and she wrote Goddesses in Every Woman, which is using the female goddess archetypes in Greek mythology. And then she wrote Gods in Every Man using the Zeus, Poseidon, and so forth. So
Mm.
let's talk about that, Kyle. I would love to do that. Kind of fun.
Yeah, I'm thinking like a cool intersection could be like a men's circle for like male like psychonauts, because that's where we get a lot of the first direct impressions and encounters like with these archetypes, and that's a particular like blend of interest that I've been wanting to bring in more of a niche. So yeah, let's contemplate that a bit more. And so yeah, Brad, thank
Yeah.
you for coming, thank you for sharing all this. Your viewers, thank you for showing up, and just thank you for doing all this work, for spreading the information, the awareness, the research, keeping people informed as to what's happening right now. I feel like it's the most important work to do, is to keep people informed of where the needle is moving, where we need to put our attention, how we can do this in a safe way. And like you said, for this talker giving, to take care of our communities. This is where it's really at. Taking care of our communities who are engaging in these ancient practices that need to be adapted to modern needs. Like, this is it. So thank you for bringing lamps to Los Angeles. Thank you for coming here to share what you've gone through to create the person you are, to create that offering, and to hopefully bring a little more knowledge and insight to those who are listening to us talk today. Thank you, Brad. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Kyle. It's been a pleasure. So appreciate it.